Hello, this is Wade Frazier. This is February 26, 2026, 11:10 a.m. So my previous post discussed the end of my days in my hometown of Ventura, California. I have not been back since 1990. Don't plan to go back. Um, yeah, no intention to do that. And I'm going to make a few posts here, which is what I learned. So it's a thing of what did I learn through my lifetime to that point, and especially what did I learn through my ride with Dennis Lee between 1986 and 1990. As I said before, I learned my life's greatest lessons in those days, and everything else been small stuff. And in fact, basically variations on a theme. So yeah, my bigger lessons were learned way back. Um, and those lessons have informed my efforts ever since though. So it's yeah, so I think the point of life on Earth is to learn. So I learned more than I ever thought I would, more than I probably wanted to. Um, so I'm gonna go down a list, and I've written about this about a decade ago. I did a whole series of posts in my forum on lessons learned, and so this is going to be basically going over those in video form. First time I've done that. And number one with a bullet of the lessons I learned was personal integrity is the world's scarcest commodity. And I resisted that lesson every step of the way until it was beaten into my head in no uncertain terms. And it really began, that journey began the day I met Dennis, when Dennis spoke in front of about 1,000 people at the Seattle Center. And in the row sitting directly in front of me was Bill Delp, the hitman from the Bonneville Power Administration. And again, Bill was responsible for the death of one of Dennis's employees. And again, and once yeah, killing people didn't even slow Bill down. And then he did a phony bankruptcy lawsuit, which the federal courts are complicit in, et cetera. And Bill Delp's attorney happened to be sitting in front of me. And again, I didn't know who anybody was except Dennis probably. And then so his attorney was sitting in front of me, and he was heckling Dennis, which I soon learned were lies. Um, so this was yeah. So I was watching Dennis get attacked with lies in a public venue the day I met him. And that set the tenor of the next several years. In fact, 2 weeks later, I watched a news clip on Dennis on the local Seattle news station, which was lies. Again, lied about Dennis. A couple weeks later, big lies, and they're not little inconsequential lies. They're really big lies. In fact, that lie, the biggest lie of that clip was that his heat pump didn't qualify for the Carter's federal tax credit, which it did. So again, these are big lies that I started seeing regularly from the media and elsewhere. And I soon learned about all the official corruption that was also involved. So the Attorney General's office was involved, but far more. So the federal bankruptcy courts, several agencies were sicked on Dennis's company. Um, yeah, IRS, and yeah, it was all sorts of stuff like that. But it was all they were all taking orders basically from the electric companies, who are probably also being instigated by the local elite, because the ringleader of the global elite at the time, the Mormon Financial Empire, was the biggest investor in Washington's electric companies, which Dennis didn't learn until later. So he was in the lion's den and didn't know it. But my biggest surprise, and so I missed most of the fireworks really, what happened in Seattle. But when I was there for just a couple months, less than 3 months, I watched Dennis's company get stolen, and I watched it. It was engineered by my boss. So, so my boss engineered the theft of the company. In fact, he was hired to complete a stock transaction for Dennis taking his company public. And my boss actually neglected to do it right. And he used his own negligence to help steal the company. Yeah. It's called fiduciary fraud. And anyway, not the first time I saw that kind of thing happen. I'm sorry, not the last time I saw that kind of thing happen. Yeah, it was the first time I saw it, but not the last. Uh, but my biggest surprise, I mean, yeah, my boss doing that was surprising. But my biggest surprise was when it became evident that he and these Mormon grifters were going to succeed in stealing Dennis's company. This big cheer went up from Dennis's employees that Dennis's company being obviously stolen. That was my first big awakening moment with Dennis. And as Dennis later said, all those people cheering inherited the wind. And then that summer, I got to watch a fight over the carcass of Dennis's company by various various thieves. Yeah, it was thieves battling over the carcass of the company. Was that was an amazing sight. But eventually followed Dennis to Boston later that year, and Boston wasn't too bad. Partly because we didn't have much going on, really. I mean, even though Dennis was making his first free energy noise. The family that took him in was kind of engaged in kind of low-level undermining of him, which became more evident in Ventura later. And I had a conversation with Bob the inventor from Seattle, who yelling at me about the money he thought he was owed. And the man that we hired to run the operation tried to steal it. You know, saw that a lot. And we were also contacted by the global elites, by the white hat and black hat factions. That's what they're called. And so, yeah, encouraging phone calls in the night from the white hats and attempts to buy us out by the black hats. And also the officials were sharpening their axes there in Massachusetts. Yeah, at partly the instigation of the corrupt authorities in Washington state. But it wouldn't surprise me if the global elite were somehow also involved in that. Um, but the worst part of that for me in Boston was actually being repeatedly attacked by a former girlfriend who was one of my smallest shareholders. She's out buying, investing $500 with me, gave her the right to repeatedly attack me until I paid her double her money back and got rid of her. But that was all just a gentle prelude to what was going to happen in my hometown of Ventura, California, soon thereafter. So we ended up moving to, again, Ventura. I wasn't involved in the decision. It was a dance between my partner Dennis and my mentor. And immediately, as we got it going there in Ventura, we start witnessed more attempts to steal our company. And again, after several, how many attempts it was eventually, beginning with what I saw there in Seattle. I told Dennis how shocking it was to see all these people trying to steal our company. And Dennis replied that the first 50 times he saw it, he was shocked too. So he assured me I'd get used to it. And I did. Eventually did get used to it, I guess. I mean, and my next shocking event, though, was when we got raided in the aftermath, when I realized that the sheriff's deputies there in my hometown committed felony acts against my company, stealing documents, this kind of stuff. I mean, it was a carefully aimed death blow at our company, which was instigated almost certainly by global elites. Or maybe local electric interests had something to do with it. They probably, in fact, local interests did have something to do with that. The CEO of the local electric company apparently authorized the hit, which our big time attorney eventually realized, but he was probably also getting advised on what to do by higher powers than his. But when the raid happened, it quickly started going downhill for me. I had another stress break. My third stress breakdown of my lifetime happened a few months later. I asked Dennis for the summer off to recover my health. And that was soon before Dennis got the $1 billion offer from the CIA to fold the operation. And a couple weeks after Dennis rejected their offer, he was arrested with $1 million bail. And that's when another hitman made his play, a guy named Ken Hodgel, Another Mormon, another Mormon criminal, which again is he was probably he was probably doing it on behalf of the global elite. I'm pretty sure of that. But also it was and promotions were handed around for the corrupt sheriff's deputies, even an award for the most difficult investigation ever performed, this kind of stuff. Um, but what really surprised me was all the people who signed on with Ken's play to steal the company, including people very close to me, which I refused to believe at first that they could actually do that. And this was more of the shocking events that I lived through. And then I watched our employees steal everything that was not nailed down. So it was actually worse than what the employees did in Seattle. But my professor, Wayne, who became my partner, um, best professor I ever had, said I was one of the best students ever. So we had this relationship for the rest of his life. And he became a beacon in the darkness. And he was really the hero for what happened in Ventura, which between Wayne and I, we saved Dennis's life. Improbably. It didn't look like Dennis had a snowball's chance when we decided that we'd do all we could to save his life. And I watched the media make it up as it went along. Yeah, lies. Media has, I think they have an ideological aversion to the truth. Yeah, I've the media pretty much never. I always watch Dennis get smeared in the media. Like the only partial exception I ever saw, again Ventura onward, was when one of the smearing journalists got subpoenaed for his role in smearing us, and then suddenly he could write an accurate article. The only accurate article I ever saw him write. But in Ventura, it was the attacks and betrayals by friends and family that again hurt me the most. And I actually can't discuss a lot of it publicly today, but many relationships crumbled. Again, relationships I thought would survive anything just crumbled in those days. And then if somebody would have told me what I was in for when I voiced when we moved to Seattle, or when we moved to Ventura, or even when I moved to Boston, I wouldn't have believed any of it. It was like, yeah, it was what happened was beyond my ability to imagine. But when I finally left my hometown in 1990, I had learned my journey's primary lesson in no uncertain terms. And it's the number one reason why we're in the predicament we are today, on the edge of oblivion. Yeah, and blaming global elites for all of it really misses the mark and does a disservice to the contribution that the rest of us make. Yeah, the global elite are the masters of a game that nearly all of humanity plays, of self-service at the expense of the whole. It's not pretty, but it's the truth. And a trap is judging it. So it's like eventually you get over your dismay and disgust, etc., and you just realize it's reality. It's the reality of the world we live in, which comes from living in a world of scarcity and fear. And anybody who's going to try to make a dent who denies that is they're in danger. It's perilous to sally forth denying that reality. And so, anyway, so yeah, personal integrity is a real scarce commodity, but it's also its most precious. And in fact, integrity is it's the key ingredient for if any effort's going to succeed at this and bringing free energy and abundance to the world, it has to be anchored in integrity. It has to be. And I'm doing something that's also integrity is a requirement, but I'm not asking people to do it at the incredibly heroic levels that a Wayne or a Dennis did. I'm not asking people to do that. I'm just asking them to muster enough integrity to reject our self-serving indoctrination and conditioning to acknowledge the truth of the world we live in. And there's many truths. And I've watched naive people reject my journey's primary lesson. Oh, Wade doesn't know what he's talking about, to go out there and try to make a dent. And the best of them come back to me chastened by the experience and ruefully acknowledging that validity. Yeah, experience is the greatest and arguably only teacher. And as I said, disillusioned idealists is the people I'm seeking, because that idealism reflected their integrity. And the disillusionment also did because they were honest enough to admit that their ideal really didn't exist, and so in fact, reality is quite often the opposite. So that was my journey's, it was my primary lesson. And I learned it by the time I was 30 years old. And everything else is noise. And in fact, as I go through the rest of these lessons I learned, they're mostly variations on that theme. So yeah, it colors everything. It really is, yeah. And as you see, as go through this, that yeah, that's the main lesson. Everything else is kind of the small stuff. And my second lesson that I listed in this list, going through this whole list, and there's a bunch of them. The other videos probably won't take as long. We'll see. Um, my second big lesson was inventors really have little more personal integrity, if any, than the general population. And this was actually the lesson that took me the longest to learn. And I look back, it was because of how I was raised. So I was raised to see inventors as heroes. And I've written about this and talked about it when in Seattle, when after Dennis's company was stolen, I came to befriend actually the inventor, the prominent inventor Dennis Stable at that time. But he's the one who actually began to disabuse me of that delusion in a number of ways. And one of them was he said inventors organizations never work because every inventor is trying to commandeer the organization to support his invention. Yes, they can't work. Yeah, it's like herding cats. Yeah, so all inventors are actually they're trying to get rich and famous and this kind of stuff. And this is what it took me a while to learn that. And Bob was the first one to sort of tell me about the problems with inventors. In fact, and then Bob exemplified it when he, I called him in Boston to try to get him involved again, to actually make it up for what happened in Seattle. And he basically yelled at me about all the money he thought he was owed from Dennis. And then the next year he tried to extort us. And after that, he tried to frighten me. And yeah, it was just, it was ugly. And then he actually begged to testify for the prosecution in Dennis's preliminary hearing in Ventura, but he literally had nothing to testify to. It's like, what? Dennis paid me a lot of money, and then even when his company got stolen, he still tried to protect me. I mean, this is yeah. So this is yeah. So actually, nobody wanted him. Even the eager prosecution who put anybody on the witness stand wouldn't put Bob on because he literally what he had to testify was about would not help the prosecution's case. And then I saw Victor Fisher, who came aboard, and again he abandoned Dennis, and then Dennis brought him back on in the '90s with my second stint with Dennis. And then he eventually betrayed Dennis and abandoned him, etc. And then I also saw Yul Brown do the same thing in '96, '97, my second stint. And by the time I watched Fisher betray Dennis, I had learned my lesson. So it's like, okay, yes, these inventors, they're not worthless. They're creative. They can be smart and brilliant, etc. But they're unreliable. They'll go to the highest bidder. They're trying to get rich and famous, particularly in the free energy field. In fact, just had another one. So they see themselves as the Messiah. Literally, they call themselves the Messiah and expect to be paid $1 trillion and all this stuff, And so and I've had to think about, why it took me so long to realize this. And again, part of it was my upbringing to see inventors as heroes, but also it probably has to do with my soul's orientation. So one of my favorite bodies of channel literature is the Micromaterial. And over 30 years ago, I had a reading from a leading Michael channel. And anyway, and she gave me a reading, and she said I was an artisan soul. And artisans are kind of a garden variety soul. They're not an exalted role, but it's in fact one of the most common. They're artisans, warriors, uh, servers. Those are the kind of the garden variety souls on the planet. And artisan souls, the positive pole of their orientation. So the greatest heights an artisan can reach is when they're creative. So creativity. So creativity is really the height of what an artisan is. And so inventors they're creative. And so I think for me, it was a thing of I thought creativity, and creativity is a divine trait. I mean, it's divinely inspired. So creative people, they're definitely touching the divine when they're creative. However, they're not always there. And so for me, it was a thing where, oh, these inventors are in touch with the creative, a divine inspiration, etc. So they must have a little bit more integrity than the general population. And they might have more, but if it is, it's just a little bit. Yeah, and that was, that's as I sort of that's my idea today as far as why it took me so long, because I'm actually an artisan soul. So I had an affinity with inventors from the beginning. So it made me kind of a little blind, let's say, to what really makes them go, which is using that creativity for the rewards of, money, power, all that kind of stuff. I said free energy inventors are all trying to get rich and famous. And in fact, I call it inventoritis eventually. In fact, Stephen Greer called it crazy inventor syndrome. So yeah, this is a problem. And it took me a while to understand that. Um, and then my next lesson was the realization of the businessman's path to free energy won't work. Yeah. And so, and Dennis, again, that was our, I met Dennis. He was a businessman, right? He was selling the world's best heating system, but putting on customers' homes for free using Jimmy Carter's tax credit. So putting the world's best heating system on people's homes for free is still the most brilliant and benevolent business strategy I ever saw or heard of. And so, yeah, it doesn't get any better than what Dennis was doing. And so, but Dennis has been an entrepreneur for more than 50 years, and it's kind of all he knows. And so, anyway, somehow he survived the Shark Tank of the USA's entrepreneurial waters. I mean, he survived numerous murder attempts from mobsters, watched his partner steal his businesses and stuff. And that was even before his Seattle days. And when I became Dennis's partner, Dennis had gotten away from the pure businessman's approach and invoked religion and nationalism as well as business opportunities. But the bottom line was still about business opportunities. And I just watched the worst in people come out constantly. And again, business opportunities is about making money, right? It's again, and when you I've likened the free energy. So normal business is dirty anyway, but if you get into you start talking about free energy, and everything gets accentuated by orders of magnitude. In fact, and I've likened it to Frodo's quest to take the One Ring, to Mount Doom, because I watched people all around me like turn into orcs lusting after the One Ring when it was the free energy quest. And even the dimmest of us, it didn't take long for people to understand that free energy was big, like in fact meant the end of the world as we know it. And I saw that. In fact, what I saw most people, they got fearful because all they saw was their little carved out niche in our world disappearing. Except they didn't go to the next step to say, well, it means heaven on earth and all niches disappear because they're all based on scarcity and fear. And so, yeah, it's like it's the end of hell on earth and the beginning of heaven on earth, but all they could see was their niche of hell they carved out and losing it, and they couldn't see the rest of it. And so anyway, so the free energy quest, and again, the businessman's path to it brought out greed, egocentrism, betrayal, all that ugliness. And I saw new dimensions of that all the time. All the time, it was another, oh, here's another dimension of this. And it was just, oof, that was a sight to see. Yeah, so basically capitalism, which is one of the three main population management ideologies in the United States. Yeah, nationalism, capitalism, organized religion are the three population management ideologies that the elites use to hurt us. Capitalism is based on greed and fear. And back to Gordon Gekko, right? Greed is good. So, but all ideologies are to a degree because we live in a world of scarcity and fear. So it makes sense that all ideologies will be based on scarcity and fear. Yes, all the dominant ideologies are about creating in groups at the expense of out groups. So if you buy into some belief system you're being taught, then you're part of the in group. And that means survival, this kind of thing. So I get it. I get it why this happens. And so anyway, so any capitalist attempt, though, because again, in the end, it's about getting rich, right? That's always the capitalist goal. um, any capitalist attempt, particularly for free energy, will have already sown the seeds of its own destruction because it invariably attracts people of corrupt motivation. They're in it for them. And so, yeah, so the perils and temptations are far too immense for a businessman's approach to this. The biggest event in the human journey. Again, wealth beyond the dreams of avarice that all of humanity would share in. This simply, the businessman's path is too small. It thinks too small. It's too prosaic. It's too much about profits and this kind of stuff to work. It won't work. Particularly again, the perils and temptations. The organized suppression is there, but I said it's people turning into orcs, which was that was the worst part of it, was watching that. And I think, and again, the biggest weakness is that. So very few people can overcome their own greed and egocentrism to really help. They're all trying to steal it from themselves. So the businessman's path just won't work. It won't work for bringing free energy to the world. And yeah, if anybody could do it, it would have been Dennis. But I saw that show too many times. And as I said before, it's like the Bill Gateses and Elon Musk of the world are down the food chain of power on Earth, and both of them have either been dissuaded or warned or whatever. And yeah, so what I call the retail elite are not going to get involved in this stuff. And so this is another lesson I learned over the years. And so that is it for these lessons. More lessons are coming in future posts, but those are kind of my biggest ones. But anyway, but there's more to come. So that's all I have for now.